Hello dolls, and welcome back to another video. Today I want to talk about the women behind the Rolling Stones. I made a video just like this all about the women behind the Beatles, and I really felt like the women of the Rolling Stones needed their own video too. These women are so truly intertwined with the history of the band, with the music they were making, as they were inspiring and shaping the band every step of the way. From well-known Stones girlfriends like Marianne Faithfull and Anita Pallenberg to Bill Wyman's 13-year-old girlfriend who he later went on to marry, this video is all about the women behind the Rolling Stones. In the 1960s, a band from Great Britain started making waves with a raw, blues-infused sound that set them apart from their polished contemporaries. While the Beatles embodied the optimism of the era, the Rolling Stones became the dark undercurrent, channeling rebellion and sensuality into their music. The Stones, with their gritty riffs, swaggering stage presence, and witty personalities, became a magnet for female fans who were drawn not only to their music but to their dangerous allure. They offered something darker, wilder, and more magnetic, a bold counterpoint to the era's traditional ideals of romance and rebellion, sparking fantasies and challenging conventions in equal measure. Behind the roaring guitars, stadium anthems, and swaggering personas of the Rolling Stones lies a quieter, often overlooked history, a story of the women who shaped, inspired, and stood alongside the world's most infamous rock band. These women were not just bystanders, they were muses, trailblazers, and, at the time, casualties of the band's meteoric rise and unrelenting chaos. From the swinging 60s to the decadent 70s, their lives were intertwined with the Stones, creating a tapestry of love, heartbreak, and survival. There was Shirley Shepherd, the rock-solid anchor in Charlie Watts' otherwise turbulent world, and Chrissy Shrimpton, whose romance with Mick Jagger reflected the fragile vulnerability beneath the band's growing fame. Linda Keith introduced Keith Richards to the blues and inspired his most soulful compositions, while Anita Pallenberg reigned as the ultimate bohemian queen, influencing everything from fashion to the Stones' mystique. Marianne Faithfull's ethereal beauty and tragic brilliance made her both a muse and a cautionary tale, while Marsha Hunt brought a staggering confidence and inspired one of the band's most famous and controversial songs. Bianca Jagger embodied glamour and intellect, offering Mick Jagger a taste of high society, while Bill Wyman's relationship with a 13-year-old shocked the world and rightfully forced the band to confront the uncomfortable intersection of fame and exploitation. Together, these women tell a story as complex as the Stones' music, one of passion and excess, one of creativity and control, of agency and erasure. Their presence wasn't just felt in the Stones' orbit, it shaped the band's sound, image, and legacy. This is their story, told in all its beauty, complexity, and at times heartbreak. So before we get into this, get yourself a drink, get comfortable. This might take a while. Usually my scripts for videos are about 5 to 7 pages long. This one is over 15 pages, so get comfortable because this might take a while. I would also very much like to recommend you this book. I'm going to read several sections from this today. This is Parachute Women, Marianne Faithfull, Marsha Hunt, Bianca Jagger, Anita Pallenberg, and the Women Behind the Rolling Stones by Elizabeth Winder. This is a fantastic read. It has some incredible pictures of these women, and it's also one of the first books to shine light on the women behind the Rolling Stones. If you're interested in learning more about this, I can also recommend you Catching Fire, the Anita Pallenberg documentary. Marianne Faithfull wrote her own biography, and then also Keith Richards' life is an incredibly compelling work. It's this huge, really thick book, but he talks a lot about these women too, especially Anita Pallenberg, but more on that later. But before these women gained their reputation for being involved with one of the greatest rock bands of the time, there were a couple of young Brits with a big dream. The Rolling Stones are one of the most iconic rock bands in history, synonymous with rebellion, excess, and an ever-evolving creative legacy. Formed in 1962, their rise to fame in the 1960s cemented them as pioneers of the British invasion, bringing a raw, bluesy edge to the global music scene. Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Brian Jones, Charlie Watts, and Bill Wyman became household names, embodying a wild, countercultural ethos. Yet, behind their music, image, and cultural resonance stood women who not only influenced their lives but shaped their art, fashion, and identity. These women played pivotal roles in the story of the Stones. Each brought their own unique energy, talents, and perspective. and every single one of them shaped the Stones and added to the myth surrounding them and their women. So just like with the Beatles video, I'm gonna go one by one, going in order of when these women joined the Stones circle. So let's start with Shirley Shepherd, the one that was there through it all. Shirley Shepherd met Charlie Watts in 1961, long before he joined the Rolling Stones, and the two were married in 1964. A fact that Charlie hid from the band for quite some time. He kind of feared that the fact that he was married would make him uncool or seem prude, and that they didn't want him in the band if they knew, but he eventually told them. Shirley was a former art student who shared Charlie's appreciation for a quieter, more refined lifestyle. Unlike many of the other women associated with the Stones, Shirley preferred to stay out of the spotlight, supporting Charlie from behind the scenes. The Watts marriage was famously stable, a rarity in the rock world. Shirley often traveled with Charlie on the tour bus, kept their family life grounded, but preferred their home life on a farm in Devon, far removed from the chaos of rock stardom. Shirley's influence on Charlie's life was profound. He often credited her for keeping him sane and stable during the height of the Stones' fame. Their enduring partnership stood in contrast to the tumultuous relationship that characterized much of the band's personal history. Together, they had a daughter, Serafina, born in 1968, who added to their grounded family dynamic. As Charlie rose to fame with the Stones, Shirley consistently prioritized their privacy, creating a sanctuary away from the limelight. They also became grandparents to Serafina's daughter Charlotte, further strengthening their close-knitted family. Shirley was known for her elegance and understated style. With her warm, approachable demeanor, she often dressed in simple, classic pieces that reflected her artistic sensibility and preference for timeless refinement over flashier trends of the day. Their relationship not only endured the pressures of fame, but also the passage of decades, a true rarity in the music world. Shirley was by Charlie's side through his battle with throat cancer in 2004 and again in 2021 when his health declined. Tragically, Charlie passed away on August 24, 2021, at the age of 80, leaving Shirley widowed after 57 years of marriage. Shirley herself passed away a year later in December 2022 at the age of 84. Her death marked the end of an extraordinary love story that stood as a quiet counterpoint to the more chaotic and public narrative of the Rolling Stones. Together, Charlie and Shirley embodied an enduring bond built on mutual respect, shared values, and a love that remained unshaken by the tides of fame. If you don't know much about the Rolling Stones, let me just tell you that this is one of the few, if not the only, stable and peaceful relationship in the entire Stone circle. So let's move on with Chrissy Shrimpton, the early girlfriend who saw it all. Chrissy Shrimpton was Mick Jagger's first serious girlfriend, dating him during the early to mid-1960s. Born on July 15, 1945, she was 2 years younger than Mick, who was born on July 26, 1943. The younger sister of iconic model Jean Shrimpton, Chrissy was a prominent model herself during the swinging London era, appearing in magazines and embodying the youthful, glamorous energy of the time. Chrissy met Mick in the early 1960s when she was still in her late teens, and he was a student at the London School of Economics, trying to balance academia with his musical aspirations. Their relationship coincided with the formative years of the Rolling Stones, as the band transitioned from performing in small clubs to becoming rising stars of the British invasion. Mick and Chrissy often attended London's vibrant social scene together, frequenting trendy spots like the Marquee Club and the Crawdaddy Club where the Stones performed in their early days. Despite their glamorous appearance in public, Chrissy later described her time with Mick as tumultuous and at times emotionally challenging. Mick's growing fame put a strain on their relationship, as did his ambitious and at times controlling personality. Chrissy, who was naturally shy and sensitive, often found it difficult to navigate the pressure of dating someone on the verge of global superstardom. She endured the whirlwind of Mick's rising profile, which included the adoration of countless female fans, adding tensions to their already complex dynamic. Their relationship was marked by frequent breakups and reconciliations, with Chrissy struggling to keep up with Mick's increasingly fast-paced lifestyle. She later revealed that Mick's charm and charisma were undeniable, but his behavior could also be manipulative, leaving her feeling emotionally neglected at times. By 1966, their relationship had run its course and they parted ways. Mick's focus on his career and the demands of fame ultimately overshadowed their romance. Chrissy, though she remained relatively private, narrated the following years of their breakup, reflected on her time with Mick as being both formative and bittersweet. She was a witness to the birth of the Rolling Stones' stardom, standing by Mick's side during the early struggles and triumphs. While their relationship ended before the Stones reached their zenith, Chrissy's role in Mick's early life influenced his approach to relationships and fame, setting the tone for his future romances. Her story and overall experience within the Stone circle very much foreshadows what a lot of women went through when dating these men back then. But let's move on with Linda Keith, Keith Richards' muse and Hendrix champion. Linda Keith was a central figure in the vibrant, swinging world of 1960s London. Born in 1964, the daughter of renowned British actor and radio presenter Alan Keith, she grew up surrounded by art, music, and culture. Linda quickly made a name for herself as a model with her striking look and chic sense of style that embodied the era's carefree, sophisticated spirit. Her role extended far beyond modeling. She was a tastemaker with a deep love of music, a quality that brought her into the orbit of some of the most significant artists of her time. Linda first met Keith Richards in 1963 at a Rolling Stones gig when the band was still establishing its reputation. The two began a romantic relationship and Linda became a muse and confidant to Keith during the mid-1960s. Her influence on him was profound, extending beyond their relationship into his artistry. Keith later credited her with opening his eyes to new music and ideas. Linda's cool intellectual demeanor and eye for talent aligned perfectly with Keith's emerging creative persona, making her one of the key figures in his early life. Linda's relationship with Keith coincided with one of the most pivotal times for the Rolling Stones. The band's rise to fame brought immense pressure, and their relationship became increasingly strained under the weight of Keith's demanding career and Linda's own struggles. Her experimentation with drugs grew more intense, which put further strain on their bond. Despite their differences, Keith was deeply affected by Linda and their time together. She inspired Ruby Tuesday, one of the Stones' most iconic ballads, written about her free spirit and the growing distance between them as her personal challenges took hold. Linda's most lasting legacy, however, lays outside of her relationship with the Stones. In 1966, during a trip to New York, Linda discovered an unknown Jimi Hendrix playing in a small club. Recognizing his extraordinary talent, she introduced him to Chas Chandler, bassist for The Animals, who became Hendrix's manager and launched his career. This act cemented Linda's place in music history, as it directly contributed to Hendrix becoming one of the most influential artists of all time. Ultimately, Linda and Keith's relationship came to an end due to her spiraling drug use. By 1967, Linda had been hospitalized for substance abuse and Keith disillusionized by her struggles and the romance. Keith reportedly struggled with feelings of betrayal and disappointment, and while he later reflected on their time together with a mix of admiration and sadness, their relationship left a lasting imprint on him. Linda's story is one of brilliance and complexity, a testament to the women who lived on the intersection of art, music, and culture during one of the most revolutionary eras of modern history. Now that Keith was single again, he would soon meet a woman he would fall head over heels for, Anita Pallenberg, the muse and bohemian icon. Anita Pallenberg was born on January 25, 1942 in Rome to Italian and German parents. She was a multifaceted artist whose influence on the Rolling Stones was profound and enduring. Fluent in 4 languages and possessing a keen intellect, she was not only a model and actress but also a cultural connoisseur who brought a cosmopolitan flair to the band's inner circle. I would like to read you a part of Parachute Woman by Elizabeth Winder because after the introduction, chapter 1 called The Phoenix begins like this. What does Mick Jagger mean to you? He makes me think of Anita Pallenberg. Quote Kim Gordon. September 14th, 1965. Munich, Zirkus Kronebau. You could tell she was different from the other Stones groupies in her beige fur jacket, skin-tight sweater, and Aussie Clark mini. She looked nothing like Carnaby Street's trendy Dollybirds with their knee socks and baby doll dresses, their saucer stares of white liner, gobs of mascara, and stripes of Glorane. Everything about her suggested experience, from her hard-to-place accent to the gladiator sandals she'd had handmade in Rome. She was overtly sensual, sexual even, but exuded an almost masculine energy. Even Mick was intimidated by this German-Italian actress who pounced backstage with the stealth of a cat. Was she just another fangirl or Jack the Ripper? She hovered in the door of the dressing room, her gaze sharp, her smile cocky, revealing flashes of fang-like teeth. She dug around her pockets for a vial of amyl nitrate. Want to smoke a joint? Mick and Keith eyed her suspiciously. They'd never done drugs before. The only coke they'd had was mixed with rum. She glanced at Brian. "Yeah, let's smoke a joint," he said, eyes filled with tears. "Come back to the hotel." They returned to his room to smoke and talk for hours, and he spent the night weeping in her arms. Anita followed the Stones to Berlin the next day. Tours were strictly girlfriend-free zones, and here Brian was flaunting his bewitching new lover. He was breaking all his rules, and he'd only known her a day. Anita and Brian Jones had a deeply tumultuous relationship, one that began with an intoxicating whirlwind of attraction, but soon spiraled into a toxic dynamic marked by control, jealousy, and ultimately violence. Upon first meeting, Anita was captivated by Brian's charisma, musical genius, and androgynous beauty. He, in turn, was drawn to her exotic European charm, confidence, and intellect. Their relationship quickly became intense, fueled by the hedonistic lifestyle that defined the mid-1960s rock scene. However, cracks began to show early on. Brian's erratic behavior, exacerbated by his drug and alcohol use, took a toll on their relationship. Anita described Brian as a deeply talented but fragile person, often consumed by insecurity. His jealousy became a major issue. He reportedly felt threatened not only by other men, but also by Anita's strong personality and independence. She later revealed that Brian could be emotionally manipulative and physically abusive, behaviors likely amplified by his substance abuse. Brian and Anita also love to dress up in these matching androgynous looks. I adore all of these pictures for them. This was very groundbreaking back then, and she often said that she would just go in and take pieces from his wardrobe, and I honestly just love that. This is such a cool concept of dressing, and it was really groundbreaking in the 1960s. In her own words, their relationship, quote, wasn't real love. It was destructive and damaging. Anita also explained that she tried to help Brian through his personal struggles, but the emotional weight became unbearable. Brian's violent tendencies made her feel increasingly unsafe. The breaking point came in 1967 when the two went on a fateful trip to Morocco with Keith Richards and others in their inner circle. During the trip, Brian's behavior became increasingly more erratic, and Anita later recounted an incident in which he physically assaulted her. The episode was a culmination of months of emotional and physical turmoil. Anita described the experience as her, quote, moment of clarity. It was during this trip that she and Keith became closer, both emotionally and romantically. In a dramatic turn, Anita left Morocco with Keith, leaving Brian behind alone to deal with his worsening health and fractured emotional state. While their departure marked the end of Anita and Brian's relationship, it also set the stage for the beginning of her long and iconic partnership with Keith Richards. Brian reportedly never fully recovered from the breakup. His physical health, emotional well-being, and role within the Rolling Stones continued to deteriorate until his tragic death in 1969. Anita would later reflect on her time with Brian as a painful chapter, acknowledging their relationship reflected both the highs and the darker realities of the 1960s counterculture. Anita and Keith's relationship would last over a decade. Together, they had 3 children, Marlon, Dandelion Angela, and a 3rd child. I want to quickly put out a trigger warning here. I'm going to talk about child loss here. If that is too much for you or just not up your alley today, that's totally fine. Please take care of you. I'm going to have the timestamp right here. You can just skip here. Keith and Anita's second son, Tara Jojo Gunn Richards, was born on March 26, 1976. Tara died of sudden infant death syndrome 2 months later. At the time of Tara's death, Keith was on tour with the Rolling Stones in Paris. In 2015, he reflected on the loss on BBC Radio 4's Desert Island Discs, saying that hearing the news over the phone was, in quote, such a shock. He continued with a scheduled appearance to cope with the event while his family was in Geneva. Quote, I thought I'm going to go mad unless I do this show tonight. If I don't do something that I'm supposed to do, if I just sit here with this idea, I don't know what I'd do, Keith said, according to The Guardian. In his autobiography, Life, he opened up about his decision to go on tour right after Anita gave birth. Quote, "Leaving a newborn is something I can't forgive myself for. It's as if I deserted my post," Keith wrote. Life co-author James Fox told the Rolling Stones magazine that the first time he and Keith spoke about Tara for the book, Keith couldn't get more than 5 words out. He added, "Then we realized we had to go back to it. He told me he thought about it every week." Anita's impact on the Rolling Stones extended far beyond their relationship. She was a muse, collaborator, and a driving force behind the band's evolving image. She once famously declared, quote, "I feel as though I'm rather like the Sixth Stone." Her bohemian style, characterized by flowing garments, eclectic accessories, and an effortless elegance, influenced the band's aesthetic and left a lasting imprint on the fashion of the era. People who encountered Anita often described her as fiercely intelligent, magnetic, and unforgettably stylish. Yet her unapologetic confidence and sharp wit could intimidate or alienate others. She was adored by those who admired her authenticity, boldness, and refusal to conform to societal norms. Anita wasn't just a muse, she was a cultural force in her own right. However, her strong personality and bohemian lifestyle also garnered criticism, particularly from those who viewed her destabilizing influence on the Rolling Stones. The tabloids of the era often painted her as a femme fatale, blaming her for leading the band members into chaos, drug abuse, and excess. Some within the Stones' inner circle resented her outspokenness and the way she challenged the male-dominated dynamics of the group. Nevertheless, her friends and admirers consistently lauded her creativity, intelligence, and resilience, painting a picture of a complex woman who was unapologetically herself. I personally think the way that Anita rubbed people the wrong way was because in a time where women were really much expected to take a back seat behind their man, Anita wasn't going to do that. She represented her almost in like a masculine kind of way. A lot of people describe this masculine energy about her. She just was so incredibly confident. She knew what she wanted and she was very outspoken about it. Something that I feel like was and still is greatly admired, especially among men. And whenever I read biographies, I over and over again run into this same kind of tale that women who presented themselves, especially back in the 60s, were not always looked at as the most beloved women. However, I just want to say here again that those who love her so deeply. While reading Keith Richards' biography, you can feel all the love that he has for her and all the admiration that he has for her, and that is truly beautiful. Like many other women in the Stone circle, Anita had her own career outside of her relationship. She began her modeling career in the early 1960s, working for major fashion houses and appearing in editorials for magazines like Vogue and Elle. Her distinctive, androgynous beauty and edgy style set her apart, making her a favorite among designers. Anita's acting career was equally unconventional, most notably her role in Barbarella from 1968 alongside Jane Fonda, where she played the villainous Black Queen. She also starred in the 1970s film Performance, a groundbreaking and controversial film that blurred the lines between reality and fiction, especially in her scenes with Mick Jagger. Anita was deeply involved in the creative process of these projects, often contributing ideas and pushing boundaries. Her career choices mirrored her personal ethos, daring, provocative, and always challenging the status quo. Despite these successes, Anita's artistic contributions were often overshadowed by her association with the Stones, a reality that frustrated her later in life as she sought recognition for her own creative legacy. As said earlier, Keith spoke really highly of Anita in his biography, and there's a biography on Anita too called She's a Rainbow, where she also speaks very highly of him. I feel like these two really had a lot of love and admiration for each other. There's one Anita quote in particular that I wanted to share here because I feel like it rounds up a lot of these experiences that these women had with the Stones, as well as Keith Richards' relationships in general. "No matter how much he loves you, he will always love his music more. I know when Keith is working on his music, nothing else matters to him." Their partnership, while passionate, faced challenges, including substance abuse and personal tragedies. Despite these hurdles, Anita's influence on Keith and the Rolling Stones remained undeniable. As mentioned earlier, she had an alleged fling with Mick Jagger too while they were filming Performance. And it's just safe to say that Anita is one of the women most intertwined with the Rolling Stones. Anita passed away on June 13th in 2017, but her legacy as a muse, style icon, an integral part of the Rolling Stones story endures. You will start to see a pattern here when you, for example, look at the Beatles and the types of wives and girlfriends they had. Besides Yoko Ono and Patti Boyd, none of these women had their own career. None of these women were famous in any sort of way. The Rolling Stones were completely different. When they got famous, they started dating around a lot of famous women. However, all of these women's careers would soon be overshadowed by their involvement with the Stones. After Anita, let's talk about another one of my personal heroines. The woman that inspired me to get my hair cut like this, and someone I genuinely look up and admire so much. This is Marianne Faithfull, the velvet-voiced songbird. Marianne Faithfull's story is one of dazzling success, scandals, resilience, and reinvention. Discovered at the age of only 17 by Rolling Stones manager Andrew Luke Oldham, Marianne Faithfull quickly became a star with her debut single As Tears Go By, which was one of the first songs written by Mick and Keith. Her angelic voice and delicate beauty captured the imagination of 1960s Britain, making her a household name. About her time with the Stones, she said, quote, "In those days, I really didn't know I had a story of my own. I was just part of their story." Just a couple pages after meeting Anita Pallenberg, this book talks about Marianne Faithfull. It's also really important to note here that Marianne and Anita were great friends. They stayed really close. They had this incredible bond that comes with this insane lifestyle of dating one of the most famous rock bands, but they also genuinely loved and cared for each other. Marianne met the Stones at a Decca party for Adrian Poster in March 1964, a time when she was admittedly very pretentious about pop music. Instead of poring over copies of Jackie and swooning over Cliff Richards like a normal 17-year-old, she worshipped Paul Valéry, Marcel Proust, and obscure cabaret artists of the Weimar Republic. That was Marianne, not just precocious, but from another dimension in her own rarefied world. Whatever her lounge esoteric world was, it certainly wasn't this. An industry launch swarming with slick, sleazy managers and would-be pop chanteuses in baby doll frocks, gobs of mascara and trendy falls, desperate for a single or a contract with Decca. Braless under her boyfriend's blue button-up, her blonde hair loosely tangled, she clung to the arm of her new man, John Dunbar, a gallery and bookshop owner who sold rare books and art to Paul McCartney. All four Beatles were there, and so were the rambunctious Stones, pranking around like spotty schoolboys. They were nothing to her Cambridge-educated, bespectacled John, whose tailored pants and artfully disheveled waves put Keith's ill-fitting leather jackets to shame. Mick was in the midst of a flaming row with Chrissy, who was sobbing her way towards a modish meltdown, tear-drenched lash stripes dangling halfway off her lids. Nearly everyone at the party was drunk. At least half were there for the free booze alone. They barreled around, shoving each other, slurring too loud and hovering too close, their faces sweat slick and pinked from cheap beer. Desperate for a little space of her own, Marianne wove her way through the crowd and perched atop a space heater. My God, she thought, what awful people. Little did she know that these awful people would soon become her inner circle, her friends, her confidants, and also the people who'd sadly ultimately tear down her entire life. By 1966, Marianne fell in love with Mick Jagger, and he adored her just as much. It was a relationship that cemented her place in the Rolling Stones mythology and the broader cultural landscape of the swinging 60s. However, as said, this wasn't her first serious relationship. She had been married before to artist John Dunbar. They even had a son, Nicholas Dunbar, born in 1965 together. She later admitted that her pregnancy pretty much was the reason why she ended up getting married. The couple's relationship was short-lived, as Marianne's burgeoning music career and her affair with Mick Jagger ultimately led to her separation. Nicholas spent much of his childhood with his paternal grandparents, while Marianne navigated the turbulent years of fame, addiction, and personal struggles. Despite these challenges, she has spoken about her love for her son and the regret she feels over the difficulties of their early years. Marianne was more than just a pop singer or a rock star's girlfriend. She was an intellectual force, a lover of poetry, literature, and philosophy, and she often introduced Mick to new cultural and artistic ideas. Her influence is evident in the sophistication and literary allusions in songs like Sympathy for the Devil, which was inspired by her interest in the works of Mikhail Bulgakov. Her relationship with Mick also made her a muse for some of the Stones' most enduring tracks, including Wild Horses, which she later described as Mick writing his regret and remorse about the end of our relationship. My personal favorite picture of Marianne and Mick is this one. This is Mick and Marianne and French actor Alain Delon, who actually has a kid with Nico, the singer of the Velvet Underground, but more on that on another day. I really adore this picture because Marianne seems to be in this incredible, engaging conversation with Alain Delon, and Mick just kind of like sits next to it like a little schoolboy, maybe a little mad that he isn't the center of attention. I've seen this floating around a lot with like the headline, "You can be Mick Jagger, but then Alain Delon kind of like takes your girlfriend," or something like that. But yeah, I just wanted to share this picture because I genuinely think it is such a fun picture. One of the most famous incidents of Marianne's time with the Stones occurred during the 1967 drug raid at Keith Richards' Redlands estate. The police, acting on a tip, raided the home and arrested Mick, Keith, and art dealer Robert Fraser on drug charges. Marianne was present during the raid, and the tabloids became obsessed with the lurid detail that she had allegedly been found wearing nothing but a fur rug. The scandalous thrust her into the spotlight as a symbol of 1960s hedonism and rebellion. Reflecting on the incident in her memoir, Faithfull, an autobiography, she wrote, quote, "It destroyed me. Not just the bust, but the whole thing. I had no idea how to cope with all the different pressures. Mick, drugs, fame, being 23 and on display." The Redlands bust not only exemplified the countercultural clash with the British establishment, but also marked the beginning of Marianne's struggles with addiction and her fall from grace in the public eye. In 1967, Mick and Marianne ended their 4-year relationship. Around this time, her drug addiction spiraled. In the years following her relationship with Mick, Marianne faced significant personal and professional challenges. Her heroin addiction and tumultuous lifestyle took a toll on her career, and for much of the 1970s, she lived in relative obscurity, often homeless and battling health issues. However, in 1979, she staged one of music's most remarkable comebacks with her album Broken English. Raw, confrontational, and deeply personal, the album showcased Marianne's huskier, world-weary voice and earned critical acclaim. Songs like The Ballad of Lucy Jordan and the title track reflected her survival and the harsh realities of her experiences. Reflecting on her rebirth as an artist, she once said, quote, "I think the first time around I wasn't really in control. I wasn't able to be fully myself. Broken English was the sound of me finally finding my voice." Marianne's later career solidified her as an enduring figure in music and art. She explored acting with roles in films such as The Girl on a Motorcycle in 1968 and more recently 2006's Marie Antoinette. She also delved into jazz and experimental music, constantly reinventing herself. Marianne has been unapologetically candid while staying true to her artistic vision. Despite the traumas and scandals, Marianne has been unapologetically candid about her life. Quote, "I regret nothing," she declared in her memoir. "I've had my ups and downs, but I've come through it all with my creativity intact." With Mick single again, it was time for a new woman to enter his life. Welcome Marsha Hunt, the trailblazing soul. Marsha Hunt's life and career encapsulates the spirit of the late 1960s and early 1970s, an era defined by social upheaval, artistic experimentation, and the breaking of conventions. Born in Philadelphia in 1946, Marsha grew up in a middle-class African-American family and later attended the University of California, Berkeley, during the height of the civil rights movement. Her education and experiences in activism shaped her worldview and her commitment to challenging societal norms. In the mid-1960s, she moved to London, where her striking afro hairstyle, confidence, and bohemian energy made her a standout figure in the city's countercultural scene. Marsha's big break came in 1968 when she was cast in the West End production of Hair, a groundbreaking rock musical that celebrated themes of liberation, love, and rebellion. A gig that came after she had slept in tube stations in London, not knowing where her career was headed. Her performance electrified audiences, and she quickly became an icon of the era. Her beauty and bold presence also led to a successful modeling career, with Marsha gracing the covers of magazines like Queen and British Vogue. She was one of the first black women to break into the predominantly white fashion industry in Britain, making her a trailblazer and a symbol of progress. The story of the two meeting each other starts with Marsha rejecting an offer. It was this departure from the English rose chanteuse that caught Mick Jagger's attention, and he asked her to pose in promotional shots for the single Honky Tonk Woman. His concept was a scantily clad, preferably black woman, perched in a bar flanked by the Stones. Marsha refused. Mick, always encouraged by a woman's refusal, was hooked. He showed up unannounced at her Bloomsbury flat after midnight, grinning sheepishly in the doorway, hands shoved in the pockets of his black peacoat. He drew one from his pocket and aimed at her like a pistol. Bang! Her response was far from overwhelming lust. The fluorescent strip lighting cast sickly shadows on his English parlor, and he had visible spots, which he later apologized for. After the Adonis-like looks of her ex Mark Bolan of T-Rex, Marsha could hardly consider Mick beautiful. But this infectious grin, boyish, candid, guileless, and direct, won her over right away. He seemed like a lost schoolboy you'd invite in for tea, which is exactly what she did. They sat on the leather Chesterfield sofa, drinking tea and smoking. Mick knew her musical mentor, Alex Corner, and having grown up worshipping blues musicians, he had an impressive knowledge of black roots and blues music. She found him eager to discuss politics and culture, alert and engaged. Quote, he was educated, he was a radical, he was not the man people think they know now. Somehow that all gets lost over time. That night they laughed so much she feared they'd wake up her roommate, the sort of laughter that had long been absent from Mick's life. His past several months had been fraught with problems. Brian, legal issues, Marianne and her drug use. He seemed inexplicably lost, and she could tell that Mick Jagger, the most famous rock star in the world, was desperately lonely. It wasn't simply loneliness that endeared him to Marsha. It was that he was so unashamedly open about it. Growing gentler by dawn. When he walked out her door at 6 a.m. saying he would call, Marsha never expected to see him again. Why was Mick so open with her when he turned so cold with Marianne? Was it because of the drugs? Marsha was completely straight. She didn't even drink. She certainly, at this point of her life, was more independent than Marianne. Whatever the reason, Marsha sensed that Mick needed to confide in her. Why did Marsha feel so responsible for the feelings of this wealthy white man? She saw celebrity as superficial and never took her own rise to the charts, let alone Mick's astronomical fame. And though she'd been sleeping with Mick since night one, she ultimately saw him as more of a friend than a lover. Her lack of passion for Mick allowed her to treat him with magnanimous, coolly detached, disinterested compassion, and she always left the door open for him. Mick admiringly referred to her steadfast reliability as Butch, and in turn Marsha saw him as a golden eagle with a broken wing. Whatever the reasons, the side Mick showed Marsha was gentle, humble, vulnerable, and sincere. For now. After their first night together, the two started seeing each other pretty frequently. Their relationship unfolded against the backdrop of a society still grappling with entrenched racism, making their interracial relationship both groundbreaking and controversial. In her memoir, Real Life, Marsha reflected on the complexity of being romantically linked to one of the most famous rock stars in the world, saying, quote, I was exotic, black, American, and different, and that was intriguing to him. Their affair was passionate but short-lived, lasting less than a year. In 1970, Marsha gave birth to her and Mick's first child, Karis. Despite Mick initially questioning his paternity, a lengthy legal battle established his role as Karis's father. Over time, Mick embraced his relationship with his daughter, and Karis became part of his life. Marsha has spoken out about her determination to raise Karis away from the chaos of rock stardom, saying in an interview, quote, I wanted to give my daughter a life that was private and rooted in reality. Marsha's influence on Mick and the Rolling Stones was profound. She inspired Brown Sugar, one of the band's most famous and controversial tracks, written during her pregnancy with Karis. Though the song's lyrics have been criticized for their racial and sexual undertones, it remains a testament to the impression Marsha left on Mick during their time together. Reflecting on the song years later, Marsha said, quote, I didn't think it was about me at the time. Mick and I never talked about it. Beyond her connection with the Stones, Marsha's career continued to flourish. She wrote several books, including her memoir Real Life and novels like Joy and Free. She also acted in films and remained a vocal advocate for social and racial justice. Her unapologetic individuality and refusal to conform to societal norms made her a role model for women of color navigating predominantly white industries. Despite the challenges she faced, Marsha Hunt has always been a symbol of resilience and authenticity. Her legacy as an artist, writer, and cultural pioneer endures, proving that her influence went far beyond her relationship with Mick Jagger. As she once said, quote, "I've lived a life of substance and I've done it on my own terms." But with Marsha out of the picture, it was time for Mick's first wife, Bianca Jagger, the glamorous trailblazer. I'm once again going to read you from Parachute Women. Midway through the tour, a woman caught Mick's eye. Raised in the twilight of Nicaragua's crumbling oligarchy, Bianca Perez Mora Marcias was as far from the 60s zeitgeist as you could get. No interest in acid, druids, or mysticism. Everything about her was angular and severe, from her cheekbones to her politics. It was as impossible to imagine her in grimy hippie layers as it was to imagine Anita at the opera. Mick met her at a party in Paris on the arm of aging billionaire Eddie Barclay. She came off haughty, pretentious, the wrong kind of snob. She was everything Anita couldn't stand. Mick fell in love instantly. After the tour, Mick flew Bianca back with him to London and quickly installed her at Cheyne Walk. Bianca was different from any girl Mick had ever been with. She had none of Marianne's sleepy permissiveness or Marsha's idealistic acceptance. The blatant vulgarity of rock culture shocked her. She spent her first 15 years planning to be a nun. She quickly caught wind of Mick's twisted droit du seigneur and hated the rumors that he'd fucked all the other Stones' wives except for Charlie's. She was also the first of Mick's girlfriends to openly identify as a feminist. "I left my native Nicaragua to escape its narrow perception of women. Little did I know when I entered my well-known marriage to Mick in 1971 that Nicaragua and the enlightened world had so many discriminatory attitudes towards women in common." Bianca Jagger brought an air of sophistication, glamour, and intellect to the Rolling Stones narrative when she married Mick Jagger in 1971. When meeting Mick, Bianca had already made a name for herself as a strikingly beautiful socialite and a commanding presence. I always believed in dressing to please myself, not to fit into a mold. Bianca's relationship with Mick was as complex as it was glamorous. She brought a worldly sophistication and an intellectual depth to his life, introducing him further to political activism and global issues. Bianca was deeply committed to social justice, and her passion for causes like human rights and environmental protection influenced Mick's own awareness of these topics. "We were from different worlds," Bianca once remarked, quote, "but I think that's what intrigued Mick. I wasn't a groupie. I was someone who had my own life and interests." Despite their shared passion for adventures and exploration, their marriage was tumultuous. Mick's infidelities and the hedonistic excess of his rock star lifestyle placed an immense strain on their relationship. Bianca famously described their union as, quote, "a circus," telling People in 1979, quote, "My marriage ended on my wedding day." The quote reflected her disillusionment with Mick's inability to commit fully to their partnership, amid the chaos and fame of his well-documented affairs. Bianca's time with Mick coincided with her rise as a fashion icon and a staple of the international jet-set scene. She became a muse for designers like Halston, Valentino, and Yves Saint Laurent, gracing the pages of Vogue and becoming a regular at Studio 54 in New York. Her effortless blend of elegance and daring made her one of the most photographed women of the 1970s. Andy Warhol, a close friend, once said, quote, "Bianca Jagger was more than beautiful. She was magnetic. She had a way of making you feel like you were in the presence of someone who truly mattered." After their divorce in 1978, Bianca reinvented herself as a dedicated activist, channeling her energy into causes she had long cared about. She became a goodwill ambassador for the Council of Europe and a prominent supporter of Amnesty International, working tirelessly to advocate for human rights, environmental protection, and social justice. Bianca traveled the world to raise awareness of issues such as deforestation, the rights of indigenous people, and the plight of refugees. She often credited her upbringing in Nicaragua, a country marked by political instability and economic disparity, for fueling her passion for activism. Quote, "I've seen poverty and oppression up close," she said. "That shaped my commitment to fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves." Bianca's activism has earned her numerous accolades, including the Right Livelihood Award in 2004 for her, quote, "dedication to the pursuit of social justice and human rights." She has also served on the boards of several organizations, including the Rainforest Foundation and the World Future Council. Despite being forever linked to the Rolling Stones, Bianca carved out a legacy that far transcended from her years with Mick. Quote, "I was more than just Mrs. Jagger," she asserted in later interviews. "I have always been a woman of my own making." Now let's talk about the most scandalous chapter of the Rolling Stones' dating life. When in his 50s, Bill Wyman decided to date a 13-year-old. I just quickly want to preface this by saying that a 13-year-old cannot consent. Everything about this is statutory rape. This is such a wild story, and when I came across it, I was a little shocked, to be honest, because I feel like I know a lot about the Rolling Stones. I read a lot about the Rolling Stones, but for some reason, they've done a really good job at kind of like sweeping this under the rug. So here I am to tell you about this absolutely insane story. Mandy Smith's relationship with Rolling Stones bassist Bill Wyman remains one of the most controversial episodes of rock and roll history. They met in 1984 at the British Rock and Pop Awards when Mandy was just 13 years old and Bill Wyman was 47. He wrote later in his autobiography, quote, "She took my breath away. She was a woman at 13. I'm sorry, that is so insane. She was not a woman at 13. She was a literal child. Like, how is this even a question? How does this 47-year-old even think he's in the position that it is even remotely okay to say things like this about a child? Their relationship became public when Mandy turned 16, the UK's age of consent at the time, leading to widespread media scrutiny. In 1989, when Mandy was 18 and Wyman was 52, they married in a civil ceremony on Bill Wyman's Suffolk estate. However, the marriage was short-lived, ending in divorce after 23 months. Mandy later attributed health issues to the stress of their relationship and the early use of birth control pills, stating that their relationship was consummated when she was 14. That is just so insane. Everything about this story is absolutely insane. The fact that she got married at 18, and at that point, she had already been with this man since she was 13. So she was married from 13 to 20, which are like very formative years. I am 26. And I still feel like I'm not fully formed in any sort of way. I'm not saying that you cannot get married young. I got married at 25. There's nothing wrong with that. But I got married to a man my age. I did not get married to a 50-year-old. And I did not start dating him when I was 13. There's just so much wrong with this. It's this imbalance of power. But it's also the way he tried to play it off as like, oh, she's so mature for her age. Which honestly, when someone says that, that's like the biggest red flag for me. This whole story is just, I cannot believe it, honestly. But you wouldn't believe it, this story gets even wilder. The aftermath of their relationship led to further complexities. In 1993, Bill Wyman's 30-year-old son from his first marriage, Stephen, married Mandy's mother, Patsy, who was then 46, though their marriage also ended in a divorce 2 years later. Everything about this. I don't have words to describe this. Please leave a comment. Tell me what you think about this. For me, this is just so insane, so wild that I almost cannot even believe it happened. And it's the story that we see over and over again with influential rock stars. There's the story of Laurie Maddox and Jimmy Page, which is pretty much the same, where like a very powerful man in the music industry ends up dating a 13 or 14-year-old. Something that is just highly illegal. And I feel like over and over again, these men keep getting away with this. And I cannot believe that he did not face any legal consequences for this. Nothing at all. And I also cannot believe, to be honest, that her parents were okay with this. Because to some extent, they must have been okay with it. And the fact that her mother went on to marry her stepson makes this whole thing just even wilder. Reflecting on her past, Mandy returned to her Catholic faith in 2005 and began counseling troubled teenagers. In 2010, she publicly advocated for raising the UK's age of consent from 16 to 18, stating, quote, "People will find that odd coming from me, but I think I do know what I'm talking about here. You are still a child, even at 16. You can never get that part of your life, your childhood back. I never could." That honestly tells me everything I need to know about the situation. And I do get that probably at the time she thought she was oh so grown up. She was told this probably over and over again. And she thought it was absolutely okay for her to be with this very old, wealthy, and influential man. But the fact that she is a fully developed person, that her frontal cortex fully developed, looks back with these thoughts and feelings breaks my heart. Because that is why these kind of things should be prohibited more. The relationship between Bill and Mandy has been wildly criticized, with many viewing it as abuse of power and a stark example of predatory behavior prevalent in the rock industry during this era. A 2019 documentary about Bill, titled The Quiet One, faced huge backlash for its portrayal of this entire situation, highlighting the ongoing discomfort and controversy surrounding their past. I even found out that a couple of years ago, Bill Wyman was invited as a guest to a film premiere or some sort of film festival, and after they found out about this, they just uninvited him. And I think it is absolutely fair. The fact that he never really publicly said how wrong this was, and he's just trying to paint it as like this romantic thing, is absolutely wild to me. He should at least have the guts to tell people that this was wrong and just thoroughly apologize. And last but not least, let's talk about Patti Hansen, the rock in Keith Richards' life. Patti Hansen, the American supermodel known for her radiant smile, all-American beauty, and down-to-earth demeanor, brought a new chapter of stability and joy to Keith Richards' life. Born in Staten Island, New York in 1956, Patti rose to fame as one of the most sought-after models of the late 1970s and early 1980s, gracing the covers of magazines like Vogue and Glamour. She first met Keith Richards in 1979 at Studio 54, the iconic New York nightclub, during his wild years following his tumultuous relationship with Anita Pallenberg. Keith later reflected on their meeting, saying, quote, "It was love at first sight. My life was complete the moment I saw her." Patti and Keith married on December 18th, 1983 in a private ceremony in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, on Keith's 40th birthday. Unlike the chaotic relationship that often surrounded the Rolling Stones, Patti and Keith's marriage proved to be remarkably solid. Patti brought a sense of calm and balance to Keith's life, helping him move past his destructive habits. "She saved me," Keith once admitted. "She's the best thing that ever happened to me." Patti and Keith have two daughters, Theodora and Alexandra, both of whom have followed in their mother's footsteps into the fashion world. Patti's career remained illustrious, even as she focused more on family during the later years. Her appearances in campaigns for Revlon and Calvin Klein cemented her status as a fashion icon, while her grounded personality made her beloved by those who knew her. Keith, too, often spoke of Patti's strength and royalty. Quote, "She's a tough girl, and she's got a heart of gold. What more could I ask for?" Their enduring love story stays as a testament to Patti's influence, bringing Keith to a sense of peace and family that he had long craved. Even as the couple navigated personal challenges, including Patti's battle with bladder cancer in the early 2000s, they emerged stronger, with Keith praising Patti's resilience. Quote, "She's the real rock in my life." Today, Keith and Patti remain one of rock and roll's most enduring couples, embodying a mix of glamour and authenticity that reflects their unique bond. There are so many more women I could include in this, like Suki Portier, Joe Bergman, Jerry Hall, Luciana Jimenez, Amanda Lear, and even Oshie Owamaya. All these women definitely had an impact too, but I felt like this video was already so long that I needed to cut it at some point. If you're interested in Oshie's story, however, Oshie was a groupie and she was involved with Keith and Mick over several years, even meeting Keith one final time before he got married to Patti. I've written an entire podcast episode about her. I have a podcast titled Unveiling the Legends, Dolls of the 60s and 70s, where my friend Abby and I share stories of all the women who spotlight was taken by men in the 1960s. So if you want to listen to that, I'll have the podcast linked in the description box. But for today, that is it. These are all the women of the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones may have built their reputation as the ultimate bad boys of rock and roll, but behind the chaos and swagger stood the woman who shaped their legacy in ways that can't be overstated. From the glamour and grit of Anita Pallenberg to the ethereal artistry of Marianne Faithfull, from Bianca Jagger's elegance to Patti Hansen's enduring strength, these women were muses, collaborators, and confidants. They challenged the band's boundaries, introducing new ideas, and in many ways served as the emotional and creative backbone of the Stones' journey. Without these women, the Rolling Stones might have never reached the height they did, artistically, emotionally, or culturally. Their stories are woven into the band's mythology, reminding us that behind every great rock anthem lies a world of complex, extraordinary relationships. In the end, the Stones didn't just make music, they lived it. And these women were the ones who helped give their lives and their songs, their depth and their drama, and their enduring allure. So that is it for this very long video today. That is it for the women behind the Rolling Stones. I really hope you enjoyed the video. There is so much more to be told about these women. As said, read Parachute Women by Elizabeth Wilder. It is an incredibly fascinating read. Such a wonderful tale of these women. I absolutely adored reading it. Leave a comment down below about all your thoughts and feelings of these women. When I read about them and kind of like how they had all these different partners, I felt like every one of them worked for them at this specific time. Marianne Faithfull, Marsha Hunt, Bianca Jagger, all such different women, but they all worked for the time that they were with the Rolling Stones, and they added so much value to these relationships. So yeah, you'll probably already hear my son and husband playing downstairs. They're a little loud, so I'm just gonna wrap this up and get down to them. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, whether this was your first time watching or you're a returning viewer. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. If you're new here, consider subscribing. I make videos all about the 60s and 70s, music, fashion, film, really whatever comes to mind. And this year, I'm also going to share so much about home makeovers because this place still needs so much renovation to be done. Also, head over to my Instagram. I'm at @EmmaRosaKatharina everywhere. I'm currently hosting a giveaway with loads of wonderful vintage pieces. I announced it today, and you now have a couple of days to enter it. So yeah, go over there and check that out. I hope you have a beautiful day. Go out, enjoy the sunshine, take yourself some time to focus on you and your mental health today, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye, dolls!